When looking at the box of this game, I noticed that it's not the LEGO Movie Videogame, but LEGO the LEGO Movie Videogame. For verbosity's sake, let's just call it the LEGO Movie. The LEGO Movie, the movie actually has an interesting relation to the LEGO games. Hell, it basically owes its existence to them. Former Warner Bros. CEO Kevin Tsujihara fought for the movie after seeing how successful the Traveler's Tales LEGO games had been for them after their purchase. And Traveler's Tales founder and fellow YouTuber Jon Burton was an executive producer on the movie. Without LEGO Star Wars, we wouldn't have ever had the LEGO Movie, and LEGO, the LEGO Movie video game, is sort of a full circle moment. The LEGO Movie game came out alongside the actual movie, both releasing in February 2014, and to maximize synergy, it was another everywhere game: PC, PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and Wii U, with the obligatory tiny versions on the 3DS, Vita, and cell phones. The LEGO Movie's odd. The game is really stripped down from the prior few. Despite the fact that Traveler's Tales was the impetus for the creation of this movie, and that this game's director was an executive producer, the game feels rushed. Like they were blindsided by the movie almost, as various licensed games in the past were, where there are odd deviations from the movie and just a general lack of content, relatively. It's not a massive issue, it's honestly a bit refreshing to be back to basics, but given Traveler's Tales' ties to the movie, it does feel kinda strange. The main stripping back comes in the overworld. As opposed to a huge open world hub, the game is divided into 5 very small hubs: Bricksburg, the Old West, Cloud Cuckoo Land, Octon Tower, and the Bonus Room, which is this game's kinda bonus level. These hubs are all quite small. You can probably walk end to end of each one in 2 minutes at most, and the only collectible presence in the overworld is red bricks, with 5 in each of the main 4 worlds. The bonus world is the closest to what would be expected from these games currently. It's a slightly larger hub set in a full-scale child's bedroom, which is extremely charming as a setting, and contains 10 gold bricks, one of which is earned for hitting a million studs like former games LEGO Cities, although the requirement is fairly easy to hit, and the other 9 of which are earned through simple puzzles, exploration, and a race. You've got to be kidding me. As far as the overworld goes, that's it. Character tokens are absent, instead being unlocked for clearing levels, which was more so a thing in the very early games like LEGO Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and it otherwise just serves as a small transition between levels. Even levels feel a bit stripped back. Most levels center on relatively simple characters: Emmett, aka Chris Pratt, who can drill through cracked walls, but as an NPC is incapable of building things as he lacks creativity. This gets very annoying as the game goes on because building is the primary way you interact with these games. And Wildstyle, who is a woman and therefore can high jump, tightrope, walk, and climb, plus can actually build stuff. Even when other characters get introduced, they tend to be on the simpler side. Batman joins the main party halfway through and can use ropes to pull apart distant objects and can build. Unikitty can smash rainbow bricks or rebuild them, and the wizard guy can do the secret knock and builds. The dynamic feels a bit off. Your ensemble is exceedingly simple. Chris Pratt sees constant use but gets stonewalled by the most basic action, while everyone else is more situational but required for those same basic actions. It feels really odd. However, the levels mostly work thanks to extremely high production values and solid set pieces. Most of the stuff in levels between the set pieces, though, is a little disappointing. I can say that this game definitely gets a little dull in the in-between moments where there's a general lack of platforming and even combat to tie things together. Collectibles in levels are much slimmer too. Golden instructions replace minikits, and there are only 5 per level, plus a pair of pants, which can be equipped to slightly change a character's look. The game really does feel, content-wise, mostly on par with the first 2 LEGO Star Wars games. Refreshingly slim, but simultaneously feeling a bit too light. Even the ability list is pretty small. Creative characters can build and master build, which are just bigger contextual builds. This is an obnoxious change: Chris Pratt before the last level or 2, and many random characters that you need, like enemies and civilians such as the firefighter, are locked out of building. Dragging Chris Pratt around feels bad, but some of the NPCs, in the derogatory sense, have unique abilities which forces way more switching than you'd otherwise need just because of the building limitation in free play. Instruction builds are not inverse. NPCs like Chris Pratt are the only ones capable of reading, apparently, and these panels give them an opportunity to be useful. Activating them makes a small minigame show up where you need to click the piece from a section that's missing in the build. It's a bit slow, but also a decently cute idea for a minigame, and it comes up rather sparingly. Construction workers can fix broken machinery and can drill on weak walls. Women can high jump, climb walls, and walk on tight ropes. Guns, batarangs, and other projectiles can break targets. The old wizard guy specifically is blind, which lets him cross certain ledges because he's not scared of falling. And he, as well as Gandalf, can perform a secret knock with their staves to enter certain hidden areas. Grapple works as it always has, pulling stuff down or pulling a character up to a point from range. Unikitty and her variants can smash and rebuild rainbow bricks. Astronauts and robots can hack stuff. The minigame here is also decent, a sort of maze game where the player needs to reach an endpoint while avoiding enemies. Although this one is also a touch too long. Bombs blow up silver, lasers break gold, the hose puts out fires. Pretty sure that the firefighter NPC is the only one that has this, and he's a non-building NPC, so fun. And there are also some characters who can start fire in context-sensitive areas to burn stuff down. Flight remains the most powerful ability, although it is notably lower power level here than before. The overworld being so small and minimized limits how useful flying is as a movement tool, but more cruelly, the levels are pretty stuffed with invisible walls and ceilings that move with progress. It's not to say flight isn't still crazy strong. Depending on the level, you can go nuts and skip huge chunks, but the game is going to do its best to fight you and make you at least do some stuff. I don't really get the motivation for it. Free play has always opened up cheese and breakage, and seeing how far you could bend things in Batman 2 and Marvel was a charming way to mix up the collectibles grind. It's still really broken. I'm just a little bit greedy as I hope this change goes away. The final ability is Green Lantern, who can make constructs out of occasional green blocks. The power itself isn't that cool, but I do like that Green Lantern was given energy projectiles. It makes him a flyer with a niche that isn't overshadowed entirely by Superman. Hopefully this better Green Lantern sticks around for Batman 3 because Batman 2's version was very lame. The set of powers is fairly basic, and characters feel a little more limited than Marvel's very colorful cast, although it's solid enough, and it's well utilized in the story if nothing else. The game isn't my favorite to play in most ways. It takes stripping back a little too far, the game feels a little bit barren, and the levels hit some odd roadblocks for it, although the game mostly rolls out on the other side okay, in no small part to its presentation. Speaking of which, this game largely nails something I offhandedly mentioned wanting while talking about LEGO City Undercover a little bit ago. In this game, everything is made of LEGO. The ground, the buildings, the clouds in the sky, even the fire and water are little individual bouncing bricks. This direction is ripped from the movie itself, and while the game can't go as insane as the movie, spraying water notably looks a little cheated, and the crazy detail present in the movie was completely unrealistic for this game. It's still a really charming style. It takes the game from bite-sized recreations to actually being a child's playset, which is a major part of the story. It's a style I wish these games dipped into more. I think it really ties the visuals and the theming together in such an adorable way, especially when it comes to atmospheric effects like water, fog, and fire. The one area that doesn't match this style is the bonus room. Given that that's the real world, well, storyline-wise, the LEGO world is fictional. It's a really fitting change, and the scale of the room, leaning over the LEGO characters, has fantastic vibes of Chibi Robo Pikmin or any other game where the mundane becomes titanic and unwieldy. While location variety is relatively low, primarily sticking to the main four settings of the overworlds, a cowboy town, a city, a cloud world, and a villain's lair, strong production design makes it all come together. The set pieces and effects are pretty fantastic across the board. One bizarre, major blemish is a trap a lot of licensed games are very guilty of, but these games had entirely dodged up to this point. Instead of retelling the story of the movie, it instead just inserts kinda awkward, half-contextless clips of the movie, which occasionally don't even really fit with what's going on. Like, they're seen from around the time of the level, but kind of just without anything around it. The biggest problem is the crust. Even on the Xbox One, the clips are notably compressed, with disgustingly crushed blacks. It looks like they compressed the movie once for the Xbox 360 and PS3 versions and didn't bother improving it for the newer consoles. They just also kinda lack the charm of proper handmade cutscenes. It's not like they didn't have access to the plot of the movie, the director of this game paid to have it made. And it's just disappointing because these games tend to have such strong cutscene direction. I hope you like Everything Is Awesome. It plays quite a bit as the ending theme for levels in mediocre rhythm game segments, sometimes even in subtle remixes. To be fair, it's very catchy and cute. Everything else is pretty standard. The music is passable but not standout, and the sound-alike cast largely does a pretty good job. Bringing the cast back for random game-specific lines would have been a hell of a cost given how stacked the cast is, but it's not distracting that Chris Pratt isn't around. Frankly, it's probably an improvement. Funnily enough, one cast member did come back. One of the editors of the LEGO Movie played Gandalf, and I guess he thought it'd be fun to do some stuff for the game too, which is cute. Most levels in this game follow a fairly similar structure to each other, and differ mostly in set pieces or occasional gimmicks. The cast doesn't so much shift as it does slowly expand, as such the changes to the gameplay and increases in complexity come fairly slow. One thing this game has that others don't is a real tutorial, a short prologue level with no collectibles that can't be replayed as far as I could tell, and which recaps the opening of the movie while running through the barest basics of the game, like jumping, which is a bit odd, as these games never really felt the need to have such a direct tutorial before, as these games really do speak for themselves. I wonder if they were anticipating a slightly younger audience to come in and start playing these off of the back of the movie, but I'm not sure what they were thinking. The first real level feels like a huge blunder. A day in the life of Chris Pratt as a construction worker sets a baseline for a movie, but in a game it feels like a drag. Performing construction tasks is about as exciting in game as it is in real life, and the extremely basic rhythm game section doesn't do much to salvage the energy. I do like the falling section at the end. These appear several times throughout the game, and while this one is pretty slim on gameplay, they're very visually interesting, and later ones do require some interaction. The second level is much stronger, introducing combat and a level design, although it does begin to show off how not great Chris Pratt is. He's fine here when he's one of two options, but the deeper it gets, the less useful his lack of building makes him. The motorcycle chase at the end is another great set piece. The budget really shows. Steering the motorcycle and shooting the police is fun as is, but wild style getting to jump on and off of it, even if it's a bit automated, is a real standout for the game. The fall that starts the next level is also fantastic. It actually has a bit of thought to it, with pits to dodge and obstacles to avoid, even if consequences are obviously minimal because it's a LEGO game. The actual level after, that begins the time in the Wild West, is good enough, but a bit underwhelming comparatively. Pretty much every level has at least some set-piece elements. The rooftops are very combat-oriented, which is a little different, but does drag on a little towards the end. But it ends in a decently fun rail shooter section, and the end of the Wild West segment is all in the back of a train. Even if the levels themselves are admittedly dry, the game kinda pushes past it with brute force. Cloud Cuckoo Land starts slower. The first level is a slow batch of puzzles, although Cloud Cuckoo Land has a lot going on visually to make up for it. The attack on Cloud Cuckoo has a cute gimmick, with most characters being taken by micromanagers. Vitruvius and Wildstyle need to rescue everyone else and use their abilities to rescue the next, and so on. It's not a huge mix-up, but it definitely feels a lot more like an actual level than most of the levels in this game do. Building the submarine is a bit weaker. Limiting it to one setting that changes enemies' attack and pieces are built is cute, but I think the core gameplay is usually a touch on the boring end as the cast gets familiar. The whole swimming level suffers from there being not much going on. An oxygen meter only matters if you don't just instantly respawn, and the mazes aren't big enough to make it stressful anyway. Infiltrating Lord Business's tower is decent after a slow start to the level. Metalbeard is gigantic and has a unique mechanic in throwing enemies at distant buttons, so controlling him has a bit of novelty to break up the standard level stuff. The next level is also decent basic stuff. The boss fight with the micromanager is cute as it incorporates everyone to do little bits of damage, but it's another pretty standard level. The TV station, also cute. The return to the city, cute. The part where you bait enemies into falling into a pit is pretty clever, but the game has a surprising lack of the big set pieces that push it over the finish line early on. The final two levels are also an odd pair. Chris Pratt spends them in his mecha, which is definitely a bit different, and in the first is paired up with Superman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman, who would barely count as featured extras in the movie, showing about as much time on screen as characters that WB would have had to pay to license, like Han Solo, Milhouse from The Simpsons, or Shaq, and are functionally out of the movie at this point. In the second, he shares it with a giant angry Unikitty, and the two, while both a little bit limited in what they can do, are pretty fun for their scale if nothing else. The major weird part is that the game kinda needs to have a game ending. While Chris Pratt is briefly in the mecha, most of the climax of the movie takes place in the real world as Will Ferrell and his son bond over his son's creativity, and he gets over the strict rules that inspired Lord Business. And this is all but carved out of the game in favor of a decent spectacle boss, ripping the limbs off of a giant robot monster to toss back at it. But it does kinda just end there. With the human segments scrapped, the game just kinda ends on a big robot exploding, which makes sense for making a game and having some sort of exciting climax, but isn't nearly as satisfying as the movie. It's a weird necessity. You can't just have the game cut away to Will Ferrell and his kid hugging it out, but the sharp deviation from the movie is a bit jarring, and probably mandated in part to dodge spoilers as the movie was still relatively fresh. Speaking of the movie, it's very cute. Written and directed by Phil Lord and Christopher Miller of the surprisingly funny 21 Jump Street movies and later the Fantastic Spider-Verse movies, the movie is fun, playful, charming, and often pretty funny. While the movie could have ended up a very awkward commercial, it does a lot of interesting stuff, embracing the creative and hodgepodge nature of LEGO with a pretty fast-paced and chaotic story about people inspiring creativity in each other, and with a cute meta story about creativity bringing people together, which is a very left field and fun inclusion. The cast is pretty stacked. It's easy to scoff at Chris Pratt bad as generic everyman animated character Emmett, but this was his first time doing this kind of role. His scuffed-ass Mario and sure-to-be embarrassing Garfield are following on what worked. And the rest of the cast, from Morgan Freeman to Elizabeth Banks to Will Ferrell, and especially Liam Neeson as Bad Cop, are all really good and funny. The movie is pretty breakneck for its pacing. It's barely an hour and a half and covers so much ground. It's a really exciting little watch. The real star of the movie is the still impressive animation. The movie is meant to look like a stop-motion LEGO movie, the kind that are all over YouTube, and there's a lot of times that could fool you into thinking it is. Characters have small scuffs on their plastic, chipped paint. Every single element of the movie is crafted from Legos, from the fire to the water to the rain, the clouds. There's a really impressive scene where they're floating in the ocean that has stop-motion waves. It looks really good. And the frame rate is sometimes choppy to emulate that style. The biggest tell that it isn't is in the angles and camera motions that would be very, very difficult and time-consuming to capture. But I don't think that it being CG really detracts from the effort to capture the Lego-ness in the movie. While the movie obviously skews a bit younger, being pretty simple and safe, I think it's got a lot of undeniable charm and humor. It's a nice, enjoyable movie, especially if you have someone younger to watch it with. LEGO the LEGO Movie Videogame is LEGO's biggest oddity in a while. There's nothing explicitly wrong with it, I don't think, and in some ways I appreciate the stripped back overworld for a brief return to simpler times, but I can't help but walk away feeling pretty meh. The big set pieces are forced to drag this game along as the actual level stuff tends to be pretty bland, so bland that there's almost nothing to say about it, save for a few higher energy ones towards the middle. It's hard to even pinpoint why this is. Chris Pratt being dead weight isn't entirely to blame, but perhaps the lack of variety is, where platforming and even action are pretty sidelined for most of the game, with kinda empty feeling levels until some set piece shakes some life into things. Having more overworld probably wouldn't fix it. I think it's just kind of not enough of a game, not complex enough of a game to plow through as it is, and the simple character dynamics just don't help. Couple that with the cutscenes being very cheap, crusty looking MP4s of the movie, and you kinda just come out of it without much impact. It's not all bad. I think a good bit of effort was put into the all LEGO art style, and that gives the game a unique flavor and a more interesting look than the others. And those big set piece moments, like the tube falling and the fall into the Wild West among a few others, usually work. I wouldn't call the LEGO movie bad, but it's very middling and unimpressive. A game not worth seeking out, and not all that memorable in the event you do.